Yeah, so my talk is the big problems with visual testing. So I'm Aditya. I am a front-end developer working at HackerRank. So visual testing? What it is? We already have so many kinds of testing. What is now visual testing? So visual testing is a lot like our regular snapshot testing. So in snapshot testing, we generate some output, and when we save it into a file, and when we run our test again, we compare the new output with the saved output, and then either we update the file or we reject it and we update our code so it works correctly. So instead of output being some code, why not the output being images? So why not compare them pixel to pixel, and that way we can see if something is broken visually. So when is it useful? It's useful when you want to test your CSS is working fine or not. Because right now our test is like two-dimensional. They test the JavaScript and HTML, but they don't test the CSS. So but CSS is very much important for the users, because of CSS the layout can be broken. So that is equally important to test. So here are some ways to do visual testing. So I'll be discussing these in my talk. So one is based on browsers, like open a browser and then take snapshot. And then the second way is that generating snapshots from component documentation. So these are the two main areas I'll be talking about. I'll be discussing the advantages, benefits of each other, and then I'll talk about the problems also with each. So first, we are discussing the browser-based test way. So here we'd use some tool like Cypress or Puppeteer to visit a page. So if we are visiting a page, that means your app needs to be served on a URL. So that means you have run your Webpack build, then you have started a local host server, or it's from Jenkins you have run it on AWS or something. So yeah, so this is one thing that you have started, and then you are using open source tools to run your visual test. So what does it encompass? So first thing is that we need to take screenshot. Both Cypress and Puppeteer have a API to take screenshots. So then once we have a screenshot, we have saved it to a file. Then we can use pixel diffing libraries to find changes. Yeah, so that will tell us either on CI or on our local that there is some difference in the pixels. But that is not all. Since these snapshots, the files that we need to save, they can't be saved on GitHub because GitHub is not usually used for storing large files. We need a different pipeline for that. So maybe you need to upload the master, the main branches images to some AWS S3 or somewhere. So you need to handle that. Then you need to set up a change review workflow that when there are changes, where will you approve it? Because with the code, you can just see it in the logs, but with images, you need something more advanced. And obviously, running pixel diffing and all these and running a browser on your CI will have increased costs. So there is one more way, which is the SaaS way. So let's talk about the software as a service approach. So here's the screenshot I took from Applitools. So this is a service which offers us visual testing, where we have to do very little. And there are similar services like Percy. So yeah, so let's look at how this works. So first we need to run Cypress either on a local machine or on a CI. That opens the browser. Then we need to call some SDK. Like here we have Applitools SDK. Then whatever is on the browser. So Applitools capture the HTML and CSS. It doesn't take a snapshot. It just records whatever the HTML and CSS is loaded on the page, and then sends it to its servers. So once it has the HTML on its server, then on their server they can open different browsers like Chrome, Firefox, and open so once they have opened, they can take screenshot on their server. They can run machine learning algorithm or whatever way they compare simple pixel diffing algorithm. And then if there are changes, then they have a dashboard where they notify you that there are some changes. So there are Slack bot which message you with the link of dashboard that there are issues you should review. So on your PR, you can know if there's some breakage. So an example. So this is my site. My site, I have added some basic visual regression tests. So here you can see that in the code block, because this code block is a complex thing. Like there are so many things going down. Like Markdown, it has MDX, and in there are code blocks which I render into a React component which has syntax highlighting. Yeah, and so a lot of things can go wrong. So here is an example that suppose for some reason the padding is not getting applied. So my visual regression suite is telling me, and so this is a screenshot of from their website. Yeah, so what are the benefits? So first is cross-browser testing. So the thing is that you opened any browser in your local machine, but that was just used to record the HTML CSS. The actual testing happens on their system, on their server. So that means they can use multiple browsers to test. So you can know if your website is still working fine on Firefox, is it still working fine on Chrome or not. And you don't have to suffer, you don't have to wait for all browsers to pass, they because they are doing it on their server. Another thing is responsive UI testing. So you can say that what are the breakpoints you want to test it, and since it has the HTML CSS, it can render it on different viewports. Another thing is that it stabilizes the page. So there are a lot of things these tools do, like they stop animations from running. If there's a GIF playing, it will stop that also. And there are different font rendering things which it takes care of, so that there are less false positives. Uh, and so diffing happens on optimized servers. So there are engineers dedicated to that, so we don't have to worry about it. And an example, so this is using Percy, which is another service. So this is a Cypress test where I grab an input, I write some things into it, and then I take a snapshot with cy.percy snapshot, and I can put a label in there. And I can take multiple snapshots, and I can also specify width at which I want to take the snapshot. Now this is pretty great that we have so many. It is pretty easy to do visual testing so far, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. So first of all end-to-end test problems apply. So as you notice that I said that we have to open a browser and visit a URL. So that means your app needs to be running properly. So that means backend server needs to be running as well. So if that is the case, then covering each condition is cumbersome. Imagine if you want to test that given this feature flag, if user is in this country, and when the network is slow and user has not given video permissions, let's suppose these conditions, then simulating the test becomes very difficult. And some situations are like not even we can't even simulate because of restrictions in browser APIs. And as you know, we are opening a browser. That means our end-to-end tests are obviously slower than what we run in Jest, and add to it visual testing, so it will be slower. And another problem is that ideally we want our test to run on every PR. So if we want that, that means our app needs to be run on a CI. So that means, so if it's a GitHub action, then you need to grab your backend server code and run that also, so that your page functions properly. If you use Jenkins, then you need DevOps help. So yeah, so this will be a big effort to set up E2E pipeline. So if you already have that, which so that is very good, then you can adapt visual testing. But if you don't have that, then this is a bottleneck. So these were the problems specific to end-to-end testing. Let's talk about problems specific to visual testing. Yeah, so first thing is content on page needs to be stable. So when I implemented visual testing at HackerRank, I was surprised to see that there were so many things that used to change. For example, I didn't know that the cards I'm showing, they have a priority in backend, and it used to change. Like similarly on jobs page, we had a jobs board where the uh, item on job, like the current job, it had some logic to highlight which job to show at the top. So if order changes or anything like a text change, then it will complain. And so you can see how many things are changing. Another thing is that commonly you take page snapshot, which means like the entire page you are taking screenshot of. But the problem is that even if something change, it will trickle down to everything. So let's say in the explanation, I just increase the margin of explanation title. So that means that everything shift down a little, and so our visual test is going crazy, and then it becomes hard to find which is what is the issue, what is the root cause which is causing this. And this is even more flaky than normal E2 test. So this is just a snapshot from Percy's Slack integration, which used to complain every day that hey, something has changed, and then I used to check and everything was fine. It was just that there was a cookie banner which used to come at a delay because of some JavaScript logic in the WordPress site, which I didn't had any control over. So sometime it came, sometime it didn't came. Then there were modules which used to open from JavaScript. So those were not always reliable that free animations are frozen or not. So sometimes there's a 1 pixel gap, 2 pixel gap between the modal animations. So what are the possible solutions if we go this SaaS way? So first is that maybe we don't need to do full E2E testing. E2E testing is great that because it tells us that what is exactly user seeing, and we can test that. But that is obviously more effort. So if we don't want to go all the way, we can do this instead. That run your app, but mock all the API calls. So Cypress has a first class approach, first class method which does this API mocking, but it has its own problem that you need to keep your mocks up to date. Another thing is that Cypress has this beta feature called component testing. So instead of visiting a URL, you can open the browser and render a React or Vue component. So that way you don't need to render the entire page. You can just render a component and provide the data it needs in context or by API mocks or whatever. And then you take so another approach is that instead of taking snapshot of entire pages, target specific DOM nodes and take a snapshot of those. Now this feature is not supported in every visual testing service. I think it is supported in Applitools but not in Percy, so you need to take care of which one you use. And another thing is that only run visual testing on mission critical pages. Now, what are these mission critical pages? So you need to talk to your product managers to find which are the features which are most important. So those are there, and then you have to talk to your data team and find out what are the pages which are visited by the users most. So once you have both of these, then only run visual testing on these pages in the starting, and you don't need to test everything. At least something is better than nothing, I'll say. And another, as a last resort, you can hide some flaky UI blocks with CSS. So these services allow you to inject custom CSS only at test during test. So you can hide those. And we have one more option. So which I already told that this is another approach where we snapshot based on component documentation. So currently all services have this integration with Storybook. So what is Storybook? So Storybook is a open source tool built by the team at Chromatic. What they help you do is that you there's a platform where you build your components and you can see it in an isolated environment. And once you have that, then you can open it in the browser and and it you can deploy it in your CI, and so other people can review it on and then they can comment on it. And yeah, so that is there. So that is Storybook, and it is really popular with the design systems because there we have component, there is no actual application, but Storybook can be used for your application also. So once you have your Storybook, uh, so yeah, so this is how your stories look. That you import your component in a file, and then you export some other components, and each component becomes a story. So and you can scroll through each story and see what. So you can see different state of your component. Like in a sidebar, you can see how does it look when it is normal, when it is collapsed, different button states, and so on. So once you have that, then you can have this workflow. So you can integrate with their Chromatic service, which is also a visual regression service integrated with Storybook. So you build your Storybook, and then you integrate with their GitHub action. So they publish it on their Chromatic service, And then so there you can do UI test. So QA team and you can your team members can review if the new change is fine, and then you can do UI reviews, visual snapshots, and that way you have a evergreen documentation. So in future people can review it, and once you have your components and your stories, then you can integrate in your app. So this is an example of chromatic. So similarly here they have also have a dashboard where in green it is showing me what is the difference. So what are the benefits of this approach? So first of all, no need to write your test. So think of it like this: you build a component, now you want to see if it works in all conditions, so you write different stories. So once you have stories, that means you have your documentation, and as soon as you have your documentation, you also have your automated visual test. So you don't need to do anything else. It is just a one line command: run chromatic, and it will go to your storybook, collect all the stories, and then repeat the process of sending it to the server and doing the visual testing. And since there is no E2E testing here, you are just rendering your components. So the CI pipeline is easy to set up. And because it is component, you can cover more situations. You just need to pass different props. And since your visual tests are isolated to a component, so it is easy to find which component is broken. And your docs will stay working. And obviously, it's a perfect fit for design systems. So now the problems part. So first thing is that since these tests are automated, that means they just render the story. You can't say that click on this button, then take a snapshot. You have to write a different story for that. So let's say you have a button and you want to check that counter is working or not. So first of all, you should have different. You should have normal tests for those. You don't need visual tests for that. But let's say you want to do, then what you do is that the component which renders the actual number, you would pass different number to that, and and then snapshot that. So you can't do user interaction, which can be a downside. And so I said that it is great for design system, but what about our actual application components? What to do there? So if we want to get full benefits of this approach, then we need to adopt component driven development. So this is a big topic, component driven development, and it is not really popular right now. But I think we should experiment with this approach where we don't start with pages. Instead, we build components, we merge those components to master, we review those components, and once the components are done, we build higher, bigger components on top of those. And once we have those reviewed and even designers have approved, then we can just integrate them in our pages. And if you're so if you want for app components use Storybook, then if the component is making API call, then you need to mock those. If that component is taking data from Redux store, then you need to wrap it in your context. So for application components, you need to take care of these things. And major downside is that the test you are running is not on the code which user is seeing. There is no webpack build that has happened. Storybook has its own config, so there can be some config changes between what you do in production versus what you are doing in Storybook. So what is the conclusion? Everything has problems, right? Well, trade-offs everywhere. And the meme, it's a mandatory to have a meme in our talks, so there goes that. So one way I'd say that we can go is that start with visual testing design system Storybook. So if you have a shared component library or design system, at least try Storybook visual testing there. That would give you an idea of what are the benefits and if it is suitable for your team. And let's say it regularly helps you avoid bugs. That way you will have data points to show to your managers that yeah, this is an approach where we can do this visual testing because it is helping us, and you can see the proof here. So once you have that, then you can take bigger things you can then set up Cypress and some SaaS service to run page snapshot on production and only for popular pages. And you don't have to cover every case, just the basic case like a dashboard. If the user visits dashboard, it is coming fine or not. And it is like you can say that it is okay if it breaks. We are just reviewing if it's fine. whatever is seen by user, we are just reviewing that. We don't need to check that if it is coming correct or not. uh, so then you can try that, use Storybook for your shared components in your application. Then and then the bigger thing would be to implement, first get implementing of E2E testing. So you need to work cross team to get your DevOps, your QA team to get on this. And once you have those, then you can adapt visual testing for some E2E tests. So if you're interested, check this link for more info. And I'm on Twitter, dev__adi. So you can follow me and DM me if you have any questions.